Hello, everybody. Welcome back to podcast number 5. And today we have Paul Hectors on from PowerShield. He's the CTO. This is a business that has been in New Zealand since 1997, and Paul was one of the first employees, shall we say, in the business, and has a very interesting background to come across. Hello, Paul. Welcome.
G'day, Paul.
It's odd, isn't it? Paul to Paul.
Yeah.
You don't find as many as you used to, but we're still around. We're still around. And something I noted to you in the our correspondence recently is that the reason for this podcast is actually based on PowerShield. So my interaction started when I first moved into data centers in 2007. And then obviously we evolved across the time. I've had a very good relationship with yourselves at the business and supporting the industry. And when I found out you had manufacturing in country, very surprised. For New Zealand, it was a very unusual situation. And then I turned up and did a tour and was sort of blown away, I suppose, about reasoning and understanding of that, which we'll get into, I suppose, from your point of view. And then when I left, as I said, we drove past Sea Legs on the corner and I was like, New Zealand just has too many businesses that aren't promoted enough within New Zealand. And, there's so many opportunities as people out there are looking at doing something or are on the fence about sort of pushing forward with ideas. And so, yeah, it took me quite a few years and obviously so stress, but the nerves, I suppose, to sort of jump into doing a podcast and inviting people to talk about themselves and their opportunities and their history to sort of help maybe one, two, anybody really. But thank you very much for your time. So if you can give us a bit of a introduction to yourself would be great. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So I started in the industry as an electronics engineer. So actually, originally, my parents immigrated to New Zealand, and so I turned up at the age of 16 in New Zealand, and then went to AUT to do an NZC in electronics and computer technology. And then after that, I worked for Fisher and Paykel. So I was very lucky to end up in the engineering department in the electronics division as an electronics technician and support the engineers there. And then I got promoted very quickly to looking after the dishwasher electronics and sort of got the title of electronics engineer. And so that gave me my start in my career, really, Fisher and Paykel. So I was there for 3 and a bit years, and then I worked for Bell South, what was known as Vodafone and now known as One New Zealand. At Bell South, I worked in the RF engineering department for creating tools to support the testing that they were doing on the network. So they were doing comparative tests between telecom and Bell South, and there was tools involved, and so I wrote some software to help support the things that they wanted to do. And then I was sick of being a number or basically working for large companies, and felt like I wanted to do something whereby I could really get involved and be responsible for when it goes wrong. Obviously, it's my fault, and when it goes right, hopefully it is also my doing. And so I ended up getting the job at PowerShield. So I was interviewed by the 3 directors at the time, and so I started that role in January 1997.
There we go. So that's interesting, isn't it? When you think about even talking about, New Zealand companies, Fisher and Paykel is such a beast, isn't it? And it's done extremely well. But I suppose getting into a company like that, normally, I suppose many moons ago when we all sort of started out, was a lifetime role. You'd sit in there and you'd look at, the opportunity and go, well, I can do this for a long period of time, be very comfortable, and then give up on life and retire. But I suppose we push forward now, don't we? For evolution, maybe is a good way to put it. Is it seems like there's a bit of a difference between the original aspects of, were you doing code, or was that something you evolved into from Fisher
Yeah,
Price?
so I started on the hardware side of things, so at Fisher and Paykel, and then I did some coding at Bell South, and then when I was at PowerShield, then it was a mixture of both. So it was a case of both doing electronics engineering and then doing some embedded code and then some high level stuff, because originally the first product was in Visual Basic, so there was some Visual Basic coding to be done.
There we go. A lot of I suppose the younger generation really don't know, I suppose, much about the earlier computers. I talked to my son about having a Amiga 500 and a Commodore 64 and playing games on it, and he
Yeah,
was talking about,
yeah.
did you play online with other people? And I was like, mate, we didn't have that.
Bulletin
And he's
boards.
like, what? What do you mean? And then, yeah, I had a
Yeah,
conversation to him about trading exchanges and bad traders, about buying things out of a
yeah.
newspaper. He just couldn't get the concept. That was literally 2 days ago. So it's the evolution is drastic. You know, you look at exactly now, like coding's everything in life, isn't it? To most people, it's just such a huge industry. It's involved. So yeah. And do you feel, I suppose, having that hands-on and that coding aspect has been, I suppose, extremely beneficial in what you do? Do you deal with anything on the external, any like hobbies that potentially use those skills as well, or are you just too much at work?
I used to a long time ago before I had kids. I always dabbled a bit with coding myself, and from my perspective, I really enjoy both hardware and software, and that's why I actually really enjoy my job, because the product stack at PowerShield is both hardware and software, and then software at sort of different levels as well. And I think it gives me an opportunity to, um, be able to talk the right language or understand what's going on at the different levels, and run the projects for that as well. So I really like having a mix of all of that. I guess the downside of that is that because you're involved in a wider range of things, you're not as knowledgeable in a particular area. But no, I like having a mix of things to do, and so I really like the combination of being involved in electronics and software.
That's very good. So I suppose we haven't really given a rundown of what PowerShield is. I suppose it's I suppose if you start from the start, but I suppose a high level is, it's basically, I shouldn't say basically, it's a battery monitoring solution. But it started that way, or was that evolution?
No, it didn't actually start that way. So, how it started was there was a need for some battery testing and capturing the battery performance with TransPower. And so, before PowerShield started, and PowerShield wasn't actually called PowerShield until 2000. It initially started as a company called Battery Technology. And before the start of the company, the salesperson or the sales director that was one of the founders of PowerShield, um, was involved in organizing or trying to customize and get a setup together to support this battery testing that Transpower had a contract out on trying to get some hardware and software to do that task. So the electronics engineer that one of the other founders of PowerShield, they built that solution and got that contract completed. And once that was done, they went, well, actually, there must be a need for this kind of thing for other companies as well. And so they started battery technology, and they went looking for an investor. And so they found an investor. His name is John Grant. So the three people that started battery technology is Chris Bennett, David Earl, and John Grant. And that started, and what they developed was a handheld battery tester.
Mm.
That was developed part time by the engineer, and then after a year, that basically just got too much for him, and because he had a day job as well, and he went, if we want to get serious, then we need to hire someone, and um, try and get things going. So I was the first employee, and my task was to support and enhance and finish basically that handheld tester. So I did that, and we sold about 20 of those in New Zealand. And what wasn't determined beforehand with regard to market size and is this worth doing,
This is viable.
is that what they hadn't really figured out was that there were the different contract service companies around, like Electrics or Downer or some of these other organizations at the time, and they would like purchase 3 of these, and then they would go and test Vodafone, they would go and test Telecom or Spark, and they would go and test some of the power utilities, because they had service contracts with all those companies. So we sold 20 of these handheld testers, and then it was, the market's basically flooded. We're done. What do we do now? So I still remember the conversation sort of at the time. It was like, is that it? Is that end of the job and, end of the company? And then it was the salesperson said, well, we could look at doing permanent battery monitoring. And the investor went, yep, let's do it. What's involved in making that happen? So spend about a year or a year and a half, developing a permanent battery monitoring system, and then got going on trying to sell that. So the company was born out of a need for battery testing as such, but the handheld battery tester had a very limited market in New Zealand. I mean, the alternative approach would have been is to try and take that product internationally, but that's how battery technology started, and it changed its name, I think, in 2000 to PowerShield.
Couple of questions in there. It's interesting, how things begin and then sort of evolve. It's interesting thinking the salesman came up with the idea. It's normally non-technical people sell things, but obviously you do need them to actually look at from a different side of the coin, isn't it? You bring the right people together in a business, you can actually get different perspectives, I suppose, and you work out to get to a solution that's beneficial. Sometimes I suppose you don't, but in this case it worked very well. So was the technology the first in the world that you're aware of?
No, we weren't. There was other products in America that did something similar.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the world first what we created.
Just made it better.
I guess, yeah.
Does that other company still exist now from America?
Yeah, they do.
Is that one of your main competitors, I'm assuming?
It's a competitor, yeah.
There we go. It's interesting that when you think about it, it's good longevity for any business that starts from a necessity of something totally different and ending up being at, 20 something years now? Jeez, it's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, 25 years, yeah.
It's a good run. So I suppose that if you think about the technology aspects across that period of time, starting in 97, I know that when I first got into the facilities of data centers and batteries are a key element. I knew nothing about obviously any of that because I was an electrician at the time. I used to install things. And then, there was this old computer sitting there picking up data, I suppose. And we actually had, I think, still had one of the first generations from the permanent battery monitoring in place, which I found very interesting. And I've seen I suppose, a life cycle of all of them, probably except for maybe the last couple of years. It's interesting to see the differences and track that journey. From a point of view, I suppose, from the development of the technology, has it been, obviously the first would be difficult, but is it leaps and bounds, or you end up doing minor tweaks to get things evolving? And is it easier now with technology, or do you think it was easier at the start?
Oh, yeah. So, good questions. So from our point of view in the market that we're in, we are not in like consumer electronics where you need to turn out a new model every year or every 2 years. So we've got a much slower cycle. So we tend to generate a new product based on new hardware, and then iterate on that hardware for a number of years before taking the next step. So a much slower cycle, but we're also in a more conservative space whereby we've actually had it where when we introduced our new product in 2017, that adoption of that new product was very difficult because people want to continue to buy the existing product. They don't want the new product because that's a risk.
Yes, yeah, that's it's interesting because in I suppose we call them critical environments, they don't like change, and proven technology is not something that people want to test in environments of that nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. And how do you? Because I know in the past we've done a few trials really of new technology, even though they've been, I suppose, well, from my point of view, from probably a back of house, they're probably large and how you adjust things to suit. But from a customer point of view, you end up with a lot better product, giving you better, I suppose, analysis management of your assets, especially a lot of people won't know, but batteries are just about in everything. But this comes
Yeah.
down to very large cells, I suppose, that cost quite a lot of money individually and over a period of time and replacement. And if you end up reducing your life cycle, it can cost you millions and millions of dollars, like maybe 5 years earlier than it needs to be. So it changes your whole sort of business case. So it's interesting, you end up developing something that is actually, gives people longevity and more insights. Because I suppose if you think about what people are doing with data now, just data in general, it's like they call it the gold, don't they? Now, yeah, it's just so much different than what you could do with it, in those days, early 2000s. And I don't even think we were even using it properly, I suppose, at the time to manage anything. It was more making sure that when you did a test, that you didn't have battery problems. It wasn't, I suppose, let's take this information and put analysis against, the last test or the test before, and stuff like that. You get a monthly report, and you sort of do that. You'd wait till it gets to a point, and then do something about it because you could sort of foresee the future at that stage. But you could probably use those insights a lot more beneficial now to, foresee the future and potentially go, okay, well, I've got a 7-year life cycle battery. Maybe I could get 6 out of this rather than potentially the 5, or maybe it'll even get to 7. But how do we, manage those sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
elements? So I suppose do you want the evolution of the business, I suppose, and has it always been manufactured in New Zealand, and reasons for that, or against?
Yeah. No, so evolution of the business has been fascinating to be involved in a company to start. From when we started, I was basically we had 2 rooms up in Albany Industrial Park, up in a building that had another business in it that had some spare office space, and we started there, and and now there is a number of offices around the world, and we've got our own manufacturing facility, and so it's so much bigger now than than obviously when it started. But yeah, I hadn't anticipated that it would ever get to sort of that point. And it's interesting the growth of the company, how that's gone. So we designed, so we had the handheld product that sold, and then that was it. And then we had a period of designing a permanent battery monitoring system, and then coming to the market with it. So we came to the market with that in 1999, and everybody thought it was a good idea, but nobody wanted to buy it because they didn't have budget, and because it was a new concept. And so, yeah, that was very frustrating in regard to, what all the effort that had gone in. And so, yeah, things were really tough in '99 for PowerShield in regard to we created this product. People seemed to like it. We'd done various shows around the country and got positive feedback and whatever, but yeah, no sales. So what really got PowerShield going was Australia. So what was happening in Australia is that we've got the UPS companies there, obviously selling, but there was an Australian UPS manufacturer that used to obviously get all the government jobs and did have a lot of the market.
Icon.
And Thycon, yeah, and they had built a battery monitor as part of their UPS as an accessory. And so that market was actually educated. It knew about battery monitoring. And all the competitors to Thycon needed something to sell against them. Now, the American products that were around were very expensive. And a lot of the time they demanded that it would be installed by somebody from the company, so they'd have to fly somebody out from the US to come and install it. So yeah, you can just imagine the costs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So when we turned up in Australia and said, "Hey, we've got this battery monitor," all of a sudden the likes of at that point in time was MG, Chloride, and Emerson, they were called then. They went, yeah, let's have it. So all of a sudden, Lee, we had a lot of success in 2000, 2001 with Australia really taking the product on. And that was really the birth of the company. And so our home market, in a way, is not New Zealand. It's actually Australia, because they got things going.
That just a question on that whole. How did you find out that Thycon had that, or did you just go, okay, well, New Zealand's not moving, we're under a bit of pressure here, get some money, so we just sort of pop over and see what's going on, and it just sort of presented itself.
Yeah, Len and I went across to Australia, and because we'd done sort of the tour around New Zealand, and so it was a case of, no, let's go over to Australia and talk to some UPS companies, and that's when you start to find out, you find out about Thycon and the fact that they were interested in our product, and so so that got things going.
And then how did you get the trickle back to New Zealand? Was there a couple of years of waiting for people to get money?
Yeah, so New Zealand did, we did have success then in New Zealand. At that point in time as well, in the late 90s, it was a very, on the electronic side of things, there was a relatively negative basically New Zealand products were not considered necessarily great when they were electronics at that point in time. That's all changed since with all sorts of great product that's being created by various New Zealand companies. But at that point in time, there was definitely sort of a negative connotation. And we were a new company with a new product. So, yeah, it's kind of worst case scenario. But with the success that we had in Australia, that kind of, because all those UPS companies that are in Australia either have offices here or they have distributors or resellers here. So that flows back that way. And what happened for PowerShield is that with selling the product into Australia and supporting those UPS companies, the people in those UPS companies would move. So they would move to UK or Singapore or Hong Kong. So PowerShield grew into Southeast Asia through the success in Australia and the relationships that we built with those companies. And so that got PowerShield to grow to a certain level, but the growth really stayed relatively steady from say 2002 to 2007. So yeah, one of the
Oh,
things
it's
about the growth of the company is that what's been interesting is that it's not a linear growth. It tends to have steps. So it'll get some growth for a few years, and then it plateaus, and then there'll be some more growth. So anyway, so there was a plateau basically until 2007, 2008, when we released our new generation battery sensor, and that had a parameter, a battery impedance that it measured, which our original system didn't have, and that limited our ability to compete with some other competitors from the UK and the US in Asia Pacific. So once we had that, and we got traction in selling that into Singapore and Hong Kong, the company had um, another set of growth and sort of grew to its next level.
it's some interesting points there, I suppose, for people that are started or in a business currently, and ensuring that you do actually keep your eyes on your competitors, I suppose, even your closest competitors, to make sure that you are meeting the market demands, or you can slip behind. I suppose it's some prime examples of that is the mobile phone industry, wasn't it? Like the iPhone turned up, blew everybody out of the water, and then BlackBerry, Nokia basically were just punished into the ground to
Right.
really not
Yeah.
resurface from something that was a extremely large companies, selling phones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nokia obviously survived in a different element, do a few phones here and there, but yeah, BlackBerry sort of dropped off the face of the earth. So some good takeaways there, isn't it, when you think about that? The
There's a
also
lot
that
of learnings. Yeah. So there's
oh
a lot
yeah.
of learnings as well. Like for instance, we took on a contract in 2003, 2002, 2003 with Singapore, and with a customer in Singapore, and that basically took our focus off our core business. And so we went after this contract, and we got two phases of the contract, and it all looked good, and it like made us money, and it all seemed like the right thing. But we took our eye off the ball basically during that period. And so had we been a few years quicker in, say, implementing the impedance parameter, we would have had success much quicker. Which
Mm,
of course, hindsight's 2020. But that was so I've always pushed within the business of, or being wary of the fact that when we've got things coming up or all these opportunities here or there, you got to, you know, really assess, is that really part of your core business? Is that where you want to head? Or is that actually a distraction?
mm.
And I think with regard to running a business and then developing product or services, it's a lot of the time easier to say yes than it is to say no.
Yes, that's yeah, because I think you need the money coming in the door as well as development going on at the same time. It's the fine line, isn't it? Really, it's especially when you're selling technically a product to the market. Like other people have some, I suppose, other products they're delivering, or multiple products, which makes it easier but also harder at the same time. But gives them a bit of buffer to sort of make sure they're getting more revenue, so you can develop that to some aspect. But that is it's another a very good point, is that yeah, if you don't keep your R&D, I suppose, alive and moving with the times, and as you say, your eye on the prize, I suppose, to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the another point that you pointed out before was that relationships, like I
Mm.
suppose with the company in general and the growth, it just sounds like a lot of people may also take that for granted to some degree. Like I suppose even if you are developing more than one product, you still obviously the same lines or logistics, and all of those elements come heavily into play, don't they? So if you don't keep your whole sort of stakeholder relationship together in a functional way, you can end up in some dire problems, I suppose. And then you see obviously things that have happened recently with COVID and shipping and manufacturing,
Oh,
and people couldn't go to work, and and the demand for your systems would have went through the roof because development of sites have gone. Yeah, it's so having the product, have you ever taken it offshore to do any test sampling of production? Or has it always been an in-country manufacturing process?
no, so yeah, answering your question with regard to the manufacturing side of things. So we've had a range of experiences over these sort of 2.5 decades. So we always started with contract manufacturing here in New Zealand because we were low volume, and that's sort of where you start. Then in somewhere around 2006 or 2006, I think we then looked at, and we did manufacture our battery sensors in China for a few batches. And that was through the help of a New Zealand manufacturer that also had capability in China at the time. Unfortunately, that did not go well for us. We did have problems with that process, and so we then moved everything back to New Zealand, and that made there was kind of mistakes made with regard to, I think, looking back, more due diligence would have been required to do that manufacturing overseas, and so we didn't do enough of our homework, I think, looking back, and basically got burnt. So that meant that we were going to be more reluctant in future to do that again. So in the end, what we ended up doing is we ended up having a joint venture with a manufacturing plant in 2016. We had somebody that wanted to set up manufacturing for us, and we were not experts in that. They were, and so that's how that got started. And then in 2019 we actually took full ownership of that. So so we've been pro manufacturing our product in New Zealand. It's given us the ability to have, I guess, a higher amount of flexibility, or being able to react to different changes that are going on, either with what our customers are doing, and it's given us engineering-wise ability to just, when there is a problem on the production line, you don't have to get on a plane and try and solve a problem, potentially also in a country where you're not speaking the language. So I imagine that there's challenges around that, but whether it's actually the most cost effective compared to some other New Zealand companies who are happily manufacturing in China or Thailand or other places. So I can't. I don't know, but for PowerShield, that's worked, and I think through the COVID period, having the ability to manage your own procurement instead of, if we were using a contract manufacturer, I'm not sure if we would have been able to have that same security of supply. I mean, it was a real challenge to get the electronic components during that period, so a lot of effort went in, but we were in full control because it was our manufacturing, and it was us purchasing, as opposed to being a customer to a contract manufacturer. And if you're not the biggest customer to that contract manufacturer, then where are you on the priority list with regard to getting stuff done, or sharing some of that stock that you so badly need. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear from other people maybe that were using contract manufacturers, how they went through that period. But we certainly managed to get through it, and I think we only had the line stop a couple of times for a few days, not for any longer period. And I know I was personally involved in assisting with the procurement at the time, and it was the toughest I've seen. in
Yeah.
my career in electronics, that was certainly, you just certain components you just couldn't get. Um, and like other companies, we redesigned our product, one of our products to um, a different set of components so that we could manufacture it. So
Oh.
yeah, a lot of effort to go into to keeping the lights on, if you will.
So did you just on that point to adjust to suit the times or requirements of necessity? Did you end up keeping that, or have you now got the two separate versions, or have you stuck with the
We actually
device?
ended up never making the version that we created that had the alternative components because initially we were told that we were never going to get um, these
Oh, supply.
components in
Yep.
time. And then closer to the period where it was all going to happen, we ended up receiving some components that allowed us to keep going. So that
Okay.
was good. The frustrating part was, we'd spent 6 or 7 months designing something
Yeah.
that we actually never ended up using. But had we not done that and had those components not arrived, then we would have been dead in the water. So yeah, but no, the design actually has not gone into production. We kept going with the original.
There we go. It's very interesting. Based on, I suppose, the COVID aspects and potentially before, I suppose, that took place because, there wasn't many stresses on the world. Do you hold much stock to, or is it sort of, it's not hand to mouth type of situation? Would you hold stock to build a quantity, I suppose, and you have a
Yeah,
forecast
well, I
and,
think things have changed a bit, obviously now, but suppliers are pretty good with regard to basically holding your stock, and you can draw that down when you need it, and
oh, that,
and that stock comes pretty quick. So the warehousing may be in Singapore or Australia, but you can have that next week. So you don't necessarily have to hold a lot of stock,
mm,
but having said that, obviously with what's happened, there is stock being held at manufacturing now, so that you at least have a certain size buffer there. Um,
mm. Well, I
in,
think,
in case there's delays in deliveries, and if something happens, like for instance, what happened during the COVID period is even trying to get stuff out of Australia across here could be quite difficult.
well, and that's the problem you have to take into consideration, not the product just getting to New Zealand being the bottom of the world, but also getting it back to wherever it needs to go in the world as well at the same time. There's
Yeah.
a double whammy, isn't it? Especially when you're under time constraints to deliver contractual obligations. I'm sure there's a bit of pressure, bit of pressure on that.
Yeah, so for us, but the bulk of our problems were actually just getting the components and then building. We actually, to my knowledge, didn't have too many problems shipping back out overseas, apart from the fact that there were obviously less options, or the shipping
Mm,
took longer.
yeah.
Yeah, so everything took longer than what it did pre-COVID.
There we go. Just jumping back to the Chinese manufacturing. How did you find there was issues? Did you do some batch sampling, or was it
Yeah,
just,
we did. So we do batch testing, and when we batch tested the sensors and did environmental tests on them, we found that the performance didn't match what what uh, what performance we get from normally. So, for example, they used 5% component when it should be 1% component tolerance, or the temperature rating, temperature behavior of the resistors were different to what we'd specified. So basically, the sensors worked, but they did not perform to our
mm.
specification. And they also put in a capacitor that was a critical part in at the time in that model, and we'd specified a few manufacturers, and they put something in, and they never came back to me to say what brand they'd used there. But yeah, that was no confidence In that build, because what they came back with was not what we had specified.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's come across other elements where people purchase things. They have I don't know, something from China that's potentially not that great, and then they sell it into a market, and they have never probably even tested it. They've just even some people drop ship stuff. So there must be all sorts of concerns that they run into when they do those type of elements. So yeah, having I suppose your quality control is a necessity. Because imagine I suppose giving it to your customers and
Yeah, yeah,
brand reputation would just be so damaged, wouldn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we I suppose what across your I suppose time out not just outside inside business, but personally, what sort of learnings have you come across that you would like be like, geez, if only I knew this when I was starting, or when I was 20, 30, 40? What are the tips or tricks you'd give yourself or others that are starting out?
Right. Yeah, I think, from a working point of view, I think, or business perspective point of view, I think, yeah, having some kind of governance early on, once you get some momentum going, I think is really critical. I think, with regard to being involved in PowerShield, when you're day to day managing or day to day doing things versus sort of a director's view, or an advisory board, having some other people that are looking at the business but are slightly removed and have that long term view. I think, if you have people that can assist with that, if you're starting a business or whatever, I think that's really critical, because as a result of that, I think you'll get to your success quicker, than how we went about things initially, where there is a certain amount of trial and error. And like I said, in the early 2000s, when we took on the contract with a Singapore customer, that was definitely a distraction. We got through it all right, but I think we would have seen our growth a couple of years sooner had we been focused on continuing the development of our product, basically for the market, as opposed to customizing something for a large contract. Yeah.
Yep.
But so, and then, yeah, personally, I think, I've had the benefit of a technical mentor. So when I was at Fisher and Paykel, I was really lucky that there was one of the engineers there who was somebody that was really skilled at teaching, and had a really good knowledge of electronics. And everybody, all the graduates that were there, would gravitate towards him, and he would, he would help them out, but help them out as such with regard to, he'd still made you work for the answers. He wouldn't like just hand it to you. But so I've kept in touch with him, and I very much, well, he's a friend. I very much value that, and that's technically helped me tremendously to have somebody to have learned from, and then to be able to sort of still discuss things, and ideas, and approaches and things with somebody like that has been gold. It's made a massive difference.
Yeah, that, I think it's great to have, very hard to find.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I was lucky. I was
yeah, yeah,
definitely lucky,
yeah.
and so that's helped me technically. That's put me in a place where there's no way I would have been able to do the
Mm.
things that I have done or been involved with, without his mentoring.
Insights. I suppose when you think about the whole layering of the board in place and having those directors as well, that technically in a way is having a larger or a group mentor base, because people come from different elements, even though they're not perceived as mentors, they are driving a direction and supporting you to do what you do to get out, and they need some feedback on a broader level. So I suppose business-wise, that also makes some fundamental sense. But it's a very good point. A lot of people miss that boat of having a good solid structure and people that can see from different points of view what needs to what needs to happen, what needs to fundamentally to go forward in the future.
Yeah.
And I suppose not always is that going to be easy sailing. I think some
Yeah.
people don't sometimes fit with a business or that brand, or like maybe they're not, but you can get some
Yeah.
insights. And I think that's a piece of the puzzle. If you look at the larger companies, that people do a tenure, or a CEO does a period of time, and it's all about a piece of time for that business where they need potentially a growth phase, or they need a
Yeah.
restructure phase, or they need to streamline operations or evolve into other countries. Yeah, there's different elements for different times, and I suppose it's interesting points. Um, and yourself, outside of what do you do to educate yourself, or others, I suppose, keep yourself learning and moving forward and making sure that you're on that sort of edge of the technology as it evolves so
Yeah.
quickly.
Well, I guess I'll probably there's been changes in our industry, but things don't move super quick. So being a bit lucky in that, I have learned a lot from being on IEEE working group. So for about just under 15 years, I every or twice a year I would go to the US, and I would be part of a group that writes and maintains the IEEE standards for the battery installation maintenance. And that group has got a wealth of experts. Basically, there's electrochemists in there, there's other electronics engineers, there's people that are trainers that are in there's just a real wide variety of experiences there. And I learned so much from being in that group, and also hearing the debate that goes on when they do the standard. Now, the other flip side of that is, I always call it's almost like a special kind of pain when you are in the room for the day working on a standard, because it can take half an hour or an hour to decide on one sentence sometimes, if it's really critical. So it can be really frustrating. But on the flip side, some of the important technical parts, you hear the debate on both sides of the argument, and you get a lot more detail around it compared to just say when you see the result in the standard. So for me, one of the important things uh, was learning at IEEE from the people that were there, and also the homework, or the standard part that you would work on. If you're working on an appendix or a piece of the standard, you would then go away with a group and research it and work on it. So you would then educate yourself in that particular area through your commitment to working on that standard. So that's that area. The other thing that I've always really enjoyed, and I've been really lucky at PowerShield, is that I've traveled to see customers on a regular basis around the world, and I always enjoy interacting with the customers, hearing their problems, and learning about how they use the product, or what they're doing, and that all helps trying to figure out what features you need to put back in. On top of that, there may be some. I haven't gone to too many of those, but there's conferences or things that where things are going on, and the internet is obviously an amazing resource. There's so much on there. But yeah, I would say a lot of my learnings in the past have come from being part of that IEEE group, and that obviously gave me knowledge about the use of the batteries, and the battery technologies, and the things around it.
It's it's interesting, isn't it, when you think about what you're just talking on, I call them like a peer group, I suppose, in some way, but your peers are a lot broader when you've got, chemists, as you say, and like just because there's so many elements that go into that sort of battery or the manufacturing of it and the importance of that. It's a lot of people, I don't think, they look at themselves in the immediate circle of what they do rather than, I suppose, the broader context to open up, I suppose, a different avenue of peer conversations. Because you're in electronics and programming, but at the same time you're in sales and marketing and, just a business in general and finance. And so I think it's opening up those different lines of communication to ensure that you are, as you say, you learn from everybody. I think as well, it's everybody has a different approach to life and they've come from a different background and everybody has an insight on a different point of view. And I think there's a lot of people that may not take every piece of information on board, which you may not, or but they also have their own direction and they may not
Yeah.
taken what they potentially would help them, I suppose, at the same time. And especially when you're growing a business, but also, knowledge base or even a network now at the same time, like as you say, it's not just the vendors that have helped you support your sort of global domination in a way, the early piece of it, but also having that client feedback is essential to, continuing with growing your brand. You got to be with them, even though you are probably slightly removed from a good portion of them. Like at the end of the day, like we didn't buy services directly from you or have from our company, but you're always there to support the product. Sort
Yeah.
of because that was what you did, and you wanted to have the best product and get the insights into reasonings for what was happening with, I suppose, the batteries or the systems themselves, and then obviously the evolution of that. Obviously, batteries are an evolving technology as well, and that's, yeah, I suppose a lot of people think about lithium. You're heavily based on lead acid, but I don't know what the future holds for the lithium elements. Most of it's car related. That's a total different beast in itself, and battery monitoring in that aspect is slightly different. But I'm assuming PowerShield still has a long way to go before it sort of, I would say, gets to a point where the evolution of the product is sort of slows down.
I think it's for any tech company that it is basically you got to keep changing and figuring out where you're going. So yeah, for us definitely the lithiums are in our market and basically have exploded with regard to, well, that's a bad term, but they're really popular with
Well,
regard to
true for a
the,
bit.
yeah, in the data center market, that there is a lot of data centers that have gone lithium. So we've now actually starting to see a bit of kickback back to lead acid, but and we are just about to release our lithium monitoring product. So we're basically focused on building a chemistry agnostic battery monitoring platform so that we can take in other chemistries that are going to come along,
Yep.
and so yeah, we need to evolve in order to not one day find out that there are no more orders, it's all finished. So no, there's lots going on, and I think that's very interesting and it's very challenging, but yeah, trying to figure out where things go next and where we can go to grow the company. One thing with regard to earlier question or whatever, personal development wise, I'll say one other interesting thing with regard to having had the luxury or the of being a first employee and making your way all the way through working for a company that is growing and changing, is that you personally, and you would do in a career anyway, is you take on different jobs and obviously then get different responsibilities. One of the challenges is, I think, probably early on when you're in a growing company, is that you initially are doing everything. Because, for instance, I was doing everything when I started at PowerShield. I was taking the phone calls and I was doing everything that needed to be done. And then, of course, as the company grows, you have got to move into your area more and more and more as time goes by. So you do need to learn to let go and obviously um, structure things in a way to make sure that you hand over those responsibilities over time. Otherwise, you end up, trying to do everything, and it gets more and more and more as the company grows. And so I think that's a personal development thing, because you got to learn to um, let go, and you got to learn to um, I guess change where you get your job satisfaction from. That was something for me, in that I struggled a bit with the move from writing code and engineering things to managing, and getting some satisfaction out of managing a project, as opposed to doing the work yourself. Because that's very satisfying, and it's very easy to say, hey, this is what I've done. Whereas when you're managing it, you're removed from that to a degree. And so for me, that was a stepping stone that took a little bit to get from doing to managing.
And were you aware of this while that process was going on, or did you get to the end of it and sort of have a look back and go, far out, that sort of piece of my journey then was, I didn't really know what was going on, and it sort of evolved. Or you,
I
were you what?
was I was not that happy in my job, and I had the luxury of having a leadership um, a person that was an HR consultant for us, and she was also running some leadership programs, which were individual leadership programs. And so I did one of those, and I found that to be hugely beneficial, because it allowed me to have a different perspective on things. Uh,
That's,
yeah, that basically questioned some of the things that I was saying, or um, my, not necessarily my beliefs, but in regard to going through the process of, what does your next few years look like, or whatever, and
mm.
what is it that you want to do, and doing a bit of soul searching, and basically going through a process of working through those questions and figuring out the answers. And that was, I was really lucky that that sort of came along. I took that opportunity, and that really helped me with that aspect.
It's very interesting. I've done varying different leadership courses across the years, and yeah, there are some great insights you get out of uh, the different ones. Some of them are very similar. I've always been, and this came up recently on a electrical forum where someone was talking about what sort of training courses they should give, because it's all hands-on. I still follow it quite closely. Um, Courses should I give to my apprentice? Is there anything to keep them into the industry? And at the time I read it, I didn't really think anything about it, but then I went back to it later, because I thought to myself, and this is something I try and develop within people that I lead, or even, peers or others that come to me for advice, and try and take my own advice sometimes. And that leadership, it's hard. Leadership is, I think it's Simon Sinek that says anybody is a leader. You don't have to lead people, you can just lead, be a leader in general, to help people drive the way forward. So I've always said, why do you give people that manage people leadership training? Why don't you give it to everybody? And then the people that, will grow into leaders, not managers, because that's two totally different things. And
Yeah,
then we're all on the same page. You can have the same conversations, the tools, everybody's got the same tool set, and those conversations are going to be so much more beneficial and the way forward. And people actually understand, that the fundamentals of what that business really needs to get you, or the business, or the area of your business to deliver, because it, fundamentally makes up the broader business. So there's quite a lot of elements in that leadership piece that I think fall by the wayside, especially when you get to the larger companies. But yeah, I think, and as I said recently, I've said that someone actually reached out to me because they'd seen that post and asked for some content. So I'm just putting some stuff together for him, because he's got an electrical company in New Zealand, and I was like, You think about it, there's a large gap, like the distance that I suppose skilled labour, tradies, have come from, where I was to getting out of it and going into management to now. Like a lot of people run businesses and lead people, and some of these businesses are extremely large now that turn over a large volume of money. But yeah, they haven't even taken into that consideration those sort of leadership structures either. They're sort of goes from a one-man band to all of a sudden you got 10 people and you just go
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think that's a very good point. Leadership training is an essential, really. Once you've done it, you realize how important those elements
yeah,
are, and you can
yeah,
take some of that away. And there's like the whole conversation. I can't remember what it's called. It's not the conversation circle, but it's like, how do you have a conversation with someone, and how do you both get the best out of what you need to deliver and within time-bound situations? And yeah, but also, I think something that's more come into it is empathy. Like a lot of people get lost in themselves. Like people are having a bad day.
yeah.
Like what's wrong? What's going on? Like mental health has sort of slipped off the face of the earth for a period of time, and it's turned back up, and it's a massive problem since COVID. So
Mm,
thank you very much for that. It's very good. It's yeah, when you sometimes you have to take a look at yourself from a different point of view to make sure that you're actually getting what you want out of a business, even if you have been there for a very long period of time, and it is like your sole piece of your life.
yeah,
It's a good way to put it. So I suppose the biggest question is for you personally, if you went to yourself when you were, say, 20, shall we say, from today, what would you
yeah.
say to that little 20-year-old Paul, or a teenager, even at school? What advice would you give to you?
Oh, then and then, yeah. That's yeah, it's very specific to myself, obviously, but for me, probably is to be less serious and maybe also be prepared to take a few more risks. So I was as a person quite risk adverse and yeah, quite serious at a young age, and I think now knowing what I know, live more
Hmm,
basically.
it's a good way to put it, isn't it? When you think about it, it's a very good way to put it. 'Cause, yeah, I think when we were talking about before we started, is I noted that was I listening to the other day. It was about the time value, isn't it? You need to do some living as well as that working, and if you save some time, some money now for the future, you get that extra time back because yeah, it burns, isn't it? It burns away. So,
It does, yeah.
um, well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great well, catching up with you in general, but also talking about technology and batteries. Obviously, I under great interest in the business full stop, let alone, the industry and the broader industry. And also discussing something that, was sort of born in New Zealand, manufactured in New Zealand, and continues to this day to evolve, at great pace. And I hope a lot of people can take away those insights that you don't have to. You don't have to go overseas to develop a product. You don't have to go offshore to manufacture products. If you
Mm.
take it from a different point of view, you can still make a very good product. Quality control is a necessity.
As a key, yeah.
Yeah, you may not make 5 million% market or something ridiculous, but you're going to have a longevity in a business because you can supply something that customers actually want, which is a product that stands the test of time and also can help grow with them. So yeah, thank you very much for that. It's
Yeah.
been
No, you're
very
welcome.
good. Yeah, very good talking to you. And I suppose if anyone does want to get some PowerShield product, you can search on the internet and there we
That's
go.
right. Get in touch.
Because you never know who's going to see this. And they're like, oh, what's battery monitoring? Yeah, because it's broadly an unknown technology outside of, like our, immediate industries, but it's
Yeah.
such a necessity. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's very
Well,
fascinating.
it's funny how years ago we used to joke here that when you were at parties or at the pub or wherever, that when people ask what you're doing and then you say battery monitoring, you'd lost them after that sentence basically. uh, but funnily enough, of course, now with electric vehicles and laptops, cell phones, iPads, all that stuff, batteries are now all of a sudden the front of mind.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, that's completely changed. So yeah, it's funny how now when people ask, "Oh, what are you doing? You're going battery monitoring?" They'll, "Oh, okay." And there'll be follow-up questions as opposed to them running away.
But then they still won't know what's going on. Even when you
So
explain, you're like, oh, okay, so it's not my phone. No, it's not your
no, no.
phone. But
So
there's
yeah,
someone
but
has
no,
something that does that. But yeah, not us, not us.
not
But big
us. No.
batteries, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, well, thank you very much.
yeah.
And yes, it's been great to talk to you and share your story or the PowerShield story as well as
The
your
person.
story and your
Yeah.
tips and tricks for everybody else out there. Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. Goodbye. Till next time.